wanted to actually play because Lloyd Austin was appearing before Congress, and I wanted to play a very short clip of the questioning that he was given and his answers regarding Russia and NATO. And let's start here. Let me just pull that up. So here we go.
General, can Ukraine win?
Yes.
What does that look? What does that look like?
Well, what we've said all along is we want to see Ukraine remain a sovereign, independent, and democratic state that has the ability to defend its sovereign territory and deter aggression. And that's been our aim from the very beginning, and it remains our aim. But yes, they can be successful.
I heard Secretary Blinken say last week in Brussels that Ukraine will soon be in NATO. You agree with that?
That's the goal of the NATO members, is to at some point bring Ukraine into NATO, and that's certainly something that Ukraine wants to see.
If you're Russia, would you want that? I'm just asking. I mean, we're playing games with Russia right now. I just want to understand why we would do that.
Certainly, if I was Russia, I would not want that, Senator. I would also not want Finland and Sweden to be a part of NATO, and they are. And the reason that they are is because Putin invaded his neighbor, and without provocation, without justification, and so that's why we that's why we are where we are. Instead of making things better for himself, he had the effect of enlarging NATO, which obviously creates worse conditions for him.
Do we have 12 CIA bases in Ukraine? Can you answer that in this setting?
CIA bases?
I got this out of the New York Times, which I don't read very often, but
I'll defer that question to the director.
So you can't answer that question. That's too difficult of a question. But maybe, Scott, your reactions to that testimony there.
Well, I mean, we can have goals, we can have objectives, and then we can. I mean, I'd still like to climb to the top of Mount Everest. That's not going to happen. And I think going to Mars and setting up, a habitable space station there would be cool. I'd like to be sort of the real life version of Matt Damon. It's not going to happen. Those are goals and objectives that aren't going to happen because they're fantasy based. But I had a very interesting conversation today with Vladimir Olyenkin, a Ukrainian politician, was a member of parliament for 3 sessions, who went to Russia after the 2014 Maidan coup. And today he is part of this Ukrainian government in waiting. He said that this war ends one of 2 ways. It ends where victory is decided by the victor or of the victor, meaning either the victor is going to impose or the victor is going to be gracious, one way or the other. And that's the only latitude you have with negotiations. If you choose unrealistic objectives as the basis of any conflict termination, then Russia is just going to impose its own will on this. If, however, you accept Russia's point, because let's just be clear, Russia is winning this war. Russia is not going to lose this war. Ukraine can't win this war. I don't know what Lloyd Austin is smoking, but Ukraine can. And here's the other thing. Ukraine will never be a member of NATO. Did you see him almost smile? Because he knows the answer to that. Oh, well, it's one of our goals. No, it's not. It's never been a goal. Ukraine was never going to be a member of NATO, especially after Russia took over Crimea in 2014. It creates an impossible situation. So that was it. But what the guy said was interesting. Let me tell you how he said this war is going to end. Because I asked about Western Ukraine. I asked about Odessa. I asked about Kharkov. He said, look, the key for Ukraine in the end is that it needs to be politically stable and economically viable. It can only be politically stable if it's been denazified. There can be you can't allow Western Ukraine to fester. So denazification implies all of Ukraine. So for all those people who were thinking about, carving off Western Ukraine, the Poles were going to get it, creating it isn't going to happen. Russia's going to denazify the totality of Western Ukraine. And but here's the other thing. Does that mean automatically now that Russia takes Odessa and Kiev? Kharkov, because I've been operating under the assumption that this doesn't end until Odessa has a Russian tricolor, put over it. He said that the Ukraine that Russia's talking about now, because notice Russia's been fairly silent on the issue of Kharkov and Odessa. In fact, Russia has been talking about buffer zones and things of that nature, but they've, other than Putin saying Russia, Odessa is a Russian city, the Russians aren't talking about taking more territory, organizing more referendum. Why? Because Russia's going for the whole boat. It's not going to be about taking Odessa and Kharkov. Russia's going whole hog. All of Ukraine will be taken. And then what will happen is that all of Ukraine, the remaining Ukraine, they'll never get Kherson, Zaporizhia back. They won't get the Donbass back. They won't get Crimea back. But they may retain Kharkov and Odessa and the rest of it, as long as, and here's the kicker, they become part of a political economic union with Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. Totally, there's no room for EU membership. There's no latitude for any of that. It's Ukraine, Belarus, Russia as an economic political union. Ukraine will still be a sovereign state, but it will be an economic union, meaning, and this is what he said, this is how we rebuild the Antonov factory. Because he said if Ukraine becomes part of the EU, Ukraine only exists to provide cheap manpower and to become a place that consumes Western products. So Ukraine will always be in debt and will never be able to dig itself out of this hole that it's in. But for Ukraine to rebuild, you have to rebuild all of the industrial base that gave it relevance during Soviet times. But what gave that industrial base relevance in the Soviet times was its connectivity to the Russian market, to the Soviet market. That's what Belarus has done. Belarus has tremendous defense industries that have retained, from the collapse of the Soviet Union until today, direct connectivity with the Russian defense industry. The trucks, the big trucks that are used for those Topol missiles and the Yars missiles, and they're made in Belarus. There's connectivity. And that was the most realistic assessment I've heard about what Ukraine looks like afterwards. And it's the only assessment that can be. And so Lloyd Austin, Tony Blinken, anybody in the Biden administration, they're fooling themselves. I mean, they literally are living in a fantasy world, and there's just no connectivity there. And Russia will dictate the outcome of this conflict, and I think that dictation is going to take place sooner rather than later, given what's going on the front line.
I'll say this. One thing was obvious, and that was that Lloyd Austin was just lying. He was just right out of his, just looking at him and lying. Why? Because both people, the questioner and the questionee, both know the truth, that they don't view Ukraine as a country. Ukraine is a political tool. They don't see Ukraine as a country. Russia sees it as a country. Russia sees the Ukrainian people, as human beings, as brothers, Slavs, etc. To the United States and to those, neocons and ghouls, it's nothing but a political tool to be used. And when that tool is finished, if you need a screwdriver, you take it out of your toolbox, you tighten or loosen your screws, and when you're done, you either put it in a screw, throw it away, lose some, maybe it's disposable. So to them, Ukraine is disposable. He doesn't have to have a realistic conversation about what happens to Ukraine in the long run, because he doesn't really care. If it works as a tool to weaken Russia now, if it works as a tool to be problematic for Russia, hopefully it can be problematic for Russia in the long term. So they see it as nothing but a political tool. The problem, I think, is this, though. The Austin and the neocons started off, and the lies about Ukraine were so they could use it as a political tool. So they could lie to the American people, and the American people wouldn't know their evil machinations, right? And they could say, oh, we're doing it for democracy, etc. Now they have to lie because they're caught in a trap of their own making. Now they can't walk away from you. They can't get out of it. Europe is falling apart. The people in there are restive. You're starting to see George Galloway. You see Slovakia elections. They're starting to see elections where there's a political sea change happening, beginning in Europe. So now, rather than lying they started off using this political tool, and now they're trapped by that political tool, and they can't get rid of it. And they're trapped with their other political tool, which is Europe. So they're in a world of trouble, and he's lying to try to protect himself and try to buy time. And the time they're trying to buy is till after the election. They're horrified that this thing's going to collapse before the election. And I think it probably will. I don't think the Russians are in any rush. I don't think the Russians are in a hurry at all. That things are going their way. The U.S. is tied up in various places. Why? They don't need to rush.
Yeah, and I mean, when you say things are going their way, we had Zelenskyy on CNN. This is what he had to say just recently.
If Congress does not help Ukraine, Ukraine will lose the war. And we need to find a public format for this. If Ukraine loses the war, other states will be attacked.
Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
So Zelenskyy is sounding the alarm. They will lose if they do not get this aid. Scott, maybe we can get you back in here to talk about what are the dynamics at play with regard not just to this aid, but really what's happening right now to Ukraine. As we hear all this bluster, too, of oil refineries being hit in Russia and some of these other attacks that are really maybe taking our eyes away from what's happening to Ukraine on that front line.
Well, again, I just want to reiterate that Ukraine's not winning this war, and Ukraine can't win this war. It's a war, and Ukraine, given the resources that have been provided to it by NATO and the collective West, Ukraine is capable of landing a few blows, and they have. I mean, kudos to them. But if we had to compare and contrast the damage to Ukraine's energy infrastructure and the damage to Russia's energy infrastructure, it's night and day. I mean, Russia, nobody wants to have a refinery get hit by a drone and have a fire take place, but it's not irreparable damage to the refinery. You're hitting a storage tank, you're hitting a transfer pipe, you're bursting it. There's going to be there's going to be liquid spill. There's going to be fire associated with that. The fire's put out, the spill's cleaned up, repairs are made, and the refinery's back in business. Ask Kharkov how things are going after its power station was hit. They're saying it isn't going to be up for years. Welcome to the difference. This war isn't going well for Ukraine. And there's nothing that can happen to turn it around. I mean, right now everybody's talking about money that's held hostage by Congress. Well, here's the reality, and Ukraine is finally woken up to this. I think Kuleba made some statements today that domestic politics is now dictating the future of Ukraine. Hey, dude, domestic politics was always dictating the future of Ukraine. Ukraine, is a tool of the United States, and foreign policy, especially when you get into election years, is always linked to domestic political reality. I mean, what's half of what's driving Joe Biden in the Middle East and Gaza right now? How it's playing at home domestically with the presidential election coming up. The same thing with Ukraine. This money has been tangled up in border security. And Mike Johnson can sit there and play word games with the Democrats all he wants to assuage them. But the bottom line is that money's not leaving as long as Donald Trump is the nominee of the Republican Party, because that money's holding Joe Biden hostage, making Joe Biden look horrible on the issue that will probably cost him the election, which is border security. And, so why would Mike Johnson, a Trump loyalist, sit there and go, well, hey, Donald, love you, man, but I'm going to do Joe Biden a real solid here. I'm going to go ahead and release the Ukraine money, the Israel money, the Taiwan money without any linkage, without requiring any changes in border security, and I'm going to undermine your presidential election. That isn't going to fly. And so Mike Johnson's a stormtrooper for Trump, and he's going to keep that money tied up until Joe Biden makes the kind of concessions on border security that the Republicans want. And Joe Biden won't do that, because that's then conceding that Donald Trump was right all along on border security and Joe Biden was wrong. And so I personally believe that there's not a snowball's chance in hell this money gets released by Congress, not anytime soon, and definitely, not even if it got released though. Let's just say, okay, let's say it got released today. What's it going to do? Nothing. Literally, not 60% of it gets put into production here at home, and it takes 2 to 5 years for the stuff that we're going to produce to get off the production line. It's not meant to go to Ukraine. It's meant to refill our own armory. And I don't know how many times we have to hear people saying, I heard, Cameron, the British foreign minister, saying the same thing today, that this is the most cost efficient thing America's done. I mean, for a fraction of our defense budget, we're tying down the Russians, we're killing a lot of Russians, and it's not costing us anything. Well, it cost Ukraine 500,000 dead. It cost Ukraine tens of millions of displaced. It cost Ukraine nearly $1 trillion of damage to its infrastructure. But as Garland pointed out, Ukraine's just a tool. We don't care about them. Break it, throw it away. And that's the most disgusting platform. That's the most disgusting stance a human being can take, especially if you call yourself a patriot. I mean, I consider myself to be an American patriot. I don't believe anything's going on in Ukraine worth a single drop of American blood. But if I did believe that there was something there, if I did believe that U.S. taxpayer dollars should be, sent to Ukraine, those taxpayer dollars have to be attached to American boots on the ground, and that the blood that's going to be spilled in this fight is going to be American blood. If this is an American cause, if this is good for America, then Americans need to die. But we're not willing to let any Americans die, which tells you that this has nothing to do with American security. Nothing to do. This is all a political game, a geopolitical game. Because the moment it has something to do with American security, we'll have our military there. But not now. We don't want our military there. We don't want to have anything to do with it, which tells you everything about the seriousness of the American approach. The fact that we allow something we claim to be an existential importance to us to get caught up in the silly season of American politics, presidential politics, to be held hostage by Congress at a time like this, that means that we're not serious about Ukraine. This is where Garland, again, is 100% right. Lloyd Austin was lying through his teeth. Ukraine means nothing to us, literally nothing to us. It's a game we're playing. We're playing a game, just like we did with Afghanistan. A tragic 2 decades long game. But in the end, when the game got inconvenient, it was boring, we didn't want to do it anymore, we ran. Just like we did in Vietnam. How many times did you hear how important Vietnam was? Domino theory, communism, got to stop them here, boom, boom, boom. But when it became inconvenient, gone instantly. And what happened? Not a damn thing. Just like what happened in Afghanistan. Did the world come to an end? Nope. Let me tell you what's going to happen when we run from Ukraine. Not a damn thing. Nothing's going to happen. Because Russia has no intention of invading Europe, moving on. There's not going to be another fight. Russia has every intention with creating a political and economic union with Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia, and calling it a day.
Two things I'll say. Number one, let's say the three of us are on a desert island and we're all starving. And I reach into my bag and I say, guys, good news. What? I got $1 million. I'll give each one of you guys $333,000. So we're all sitting there with $333,000. You know what we're going to do? We're going to starve to death with $333,000 each, because there ain't no food to buy on that desert island. So let's just say they say, 100 billion ain't enough. Let's give them $1 trillion. Let's give them 10 trillion. Here's your 10 trillion. I'm sorry, there's nothing to buy. Think about this. If the U.S. had all of these rounds, if all of these rounds were available in Europe, do you think they'd wait around for the money? They give them to them now. They'd already have them. If all the money comes through, they can give Ukraine money. Now that they can do, they can launder some money into Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. They can send some money to the oligarchs and they'll, I guess, buy some more crypto, whatever the hell they did that for. They'll do some way to launder the money, but the hardware that they need is not available. That's why they're calling Saudi Arabia. They're calling all around the world right now looking for, and if they found it, they get it and send it there. So in a way, I could make an argument that there are people who are with Biden administration thinking to themselves, we'd be better off if we don't get the money. Number one, if we get the money, everybody's going to say, now you got the money. Okay, buy them all the stuff and send it to them. And they're going to go, well, yeah, we're looking around. We're trying to find, so it exposes that the industrial capacity of the West for military hardware is kaput if they get the money and they can't buy anything. Number one. Number two, they're going to lose anyway. If they don't get the money, they can then say, we would have won if they'd have only given us the money. But if they get the money, they don't have that. So I think not having them the money gives them an excuse because they know the hell they're going to lose. And they can just say, oh, if only we'd have got the money, it's all the Republicans' fault. It's not going to work, but they at least will have that. I think the worst thing that could happen to them is to get the money and then they're exposed from one end to the next. Just think about this, how bad this is. Here you go. You want 60, here's $80 billion. A month later, the lines all collapse. In Ukraine, and the Russians are overrunning the lines and everything's, and nothing changes whatsoever. Let's say the Russians continue what they're doing, nothing changes, or the lines collapse. And everybody's like, well, you said if you got $60 billion, you could fix things. You got the $60 billion. Now they're going to catch hell for losing and for wasting $60 billion. I don't think they want the money in a way, Scott, Danny.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you both were saying, I mean, the lying through the teeth, even just that clip of Lloyd Austin in front of Congress, all parties there sounded like they were just reading from a script until they asked about the CIA bases, and then it was, no, we can't.
Did you notice one thing?
The smiles started to come out. Yeah,
one quick thing. Tommy Tuberville said, can Ukraine win? And he said, yeah, I think they can be successful. He changed it from win to successful, and then they can redefine what's successful. There's maybe one person left alive. Okay, that's success. Yeah, everybody didn't die. They were successful.
Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I appreciate all of your support. This channel, however, needs your help. I am seeking to make this channel more sustainable in the long term and upgrade necessary equipment to ensure that this work continues onward and makes progress to give you all of the geopolitical analysis that you all deserve. For that reason, I'm asking you to become a member of my Patreon community at patreon.com/DannyDhaiphong. You can find that link in the video description or in the pinned comment below. For whatever amount you choose to give, just know you are supporting independent media that you can't find anywhere else. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the next video.